Hello, everybody. It's Saturday night at 10 o'clock. I am Chris Weave. I actually have Alec here, but he's messing with his gear. He should be on any second now as soon as he gets a few things taken care of. But until he gets on, good evening to everybody. Pat is obviously not available this week. I don't know what when he's available next. I'm unavailable next week, so I don't plan on doing a show next week. I'm going to be at a gaming convention, and there's Alec.
So, hello.
How are you this evening, Alec?
Oh my God, just I can't even tell you, but yes, one of the most significant things ever to happen to Axanar just happened, and so I'm very, very happy.
You're very, very happy, but you can't tell us.
But I can't tell you why. But life is good.
Do you know when you can tell?
Yeah, when certain things happen, which I can't tell you about.
Well,
it's a very complicated situation. The good news is there's lots of good news. Honestly, it's been the best. I hate to talk about Axanar on your show, but it's been the best 6 weeks. It's been the best 6 weeks of Axanar since 2015, before we got to when we raised the second tranche of money. And there's so many different things happening. The shoot happened, of course, and that was spectacular. And we've been casting for LA, and right now we're 3 out of 4 for who we want. So that's gone fantastic. And then there are money issues, and that's gone fantastic. And then there's legal issues, and that's gone fantastic. Everything is going well, except we lost our very dear artist, Mark Payton, who'd been working with us for years, and he passed from cancer yesterday morning. So that is, we do need to acknowledge that. And I just spoke to him on Wednesday. I just did a video with him, and he was getting transferred home, and before he could even get home, he passed. And that sucks. So it kind of grounds you, so
yeah.
We're blessed, and our condolences to Mark's family. But other than that, that's very sad news. But other things have been going well, so I count our blessings.
I am very, very glad that that everything is going well. I'm sorry to hear about Mark. That's not good, but
the big C, man.
Yeah. Well, I've been there, although I had the stuff that I had. I hesitate to even add it to the list, because I had if you had to choose what type of cancer you're going to have, I had the one that you would choose, which was low-grade non-invasive bladder cancer.
Oh, wow. God. Sheesh. Yeah.
So but I actually got a chance to see it because I got scoped. And so I was there. I knew about it right when the doctor did. It's like, oh, what's that? Is that supposed to be there? Nope, that's not supposed to be there.
Gosh.
So, yeah. So I've been, but which that just means I get to go get scoped at least once a year.
Yeah, I hear you.
Which is just as much fun as you can imagine it would be.
Oh, God. Well, I our good dear friend Dana Wagner, who takes care of the sets at the
show,
he just beat it. He just beat it, and we're very happy about that. So yeah. Oh, and I just do have to give a shout out to Misako. How are you, Misako? That is Jim Ross, our gaffer. That is his daughter, and she stops by from time to time. To say hi. She was the one handling the clapper, at not the clapper for your lights, the clapper for movies on set, and she's everyone loves her. So it's good to have you here. So what are we talking about tonight?
So that's actually sort of funny, because I'll let everybody in at the same time. So at some point, I'm going to restart. You may recall I was marching through a bunch of professional readings about naval warfare. I had talked about Admiral Harris Landing's May 1933 discussion about how battle line tactics work. I had then talked about Trent Hone and the development of he's a historian who did some work on the development of doctrine in the interwar period and how that extended through World War II. I looked at some stuff from a technologist at Los Alamos named Karl Lautenschlager, who talks about how naval warfare developed over time, et cetera, et cetera. And I was, I had other things on the list of things to do, and I was marching forward with that. And then I got to go spend a week in the ICU and, was basically totally down for the count for about a month with anemia. And, I was at the point where I was planning my excursions getting out of bed. So it's like, I at some point I need to go to the bathroom and I need to go to the kitchen. And if I wait a half hour, I can make that one trip rather than two, because getting out of bed was that hard to do for a while. And so I did all this stuff from like April through June of last year, and then totally got knocked off my rocker on that. And so I sort of lost lock on it. And we've done a lot of other stuff since then, like TJ and Rob have been on talking about Battlestar Galactica, and we've had some other stuff like that. So what I spent today doing is I put together a presentation, which I'm going to save in my hip pocket, I think. We'll just talk on some other stuff. I put together a presentation that's basically the summary of everything we've talked about so far. Because on the one hand, I figured the audience probably needed to sort of get back up to speed into the rhythm of things. On the other hand, I did. It's not that I haven't been reading stuff like that since then, but it's like, I wanted to sort of take it together and put it all in one great big context and sort of talk about it all. And since I have continued to do some reading, there's a few things I can add on to it. Like, I learned something really interesting. Did you know? Have you been to any of the battleship museum ships around?
No, I've never been to a battleship. I was on the Intrepid in New York when it first opened up years ago. And wait, yeah, no. And then what's the one in South Carolina? That's a carrier too, isn't it? In Charleston.
I don't know about South Carolina.
Yeah, in Charleston, there's I want to say it's the Essex, and I could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so I have not been on any.
So, by the way, you're having that brand spanking new microphone you bought is having some issues.
Is that my problem?
It's your connection, because when you were moving your camera around and everything earlier, you were juddering.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I don't know why that is. Oh, it's the USS Yorktown is in Charleston.
So, but battleships are cool. My favorite battleship to go. I've been on the Massachusetts. I've been on the New Jersey. I've been on the Wisconsin. I was on the Wisconsin a couple of weeks ago. In fact, I think I sent you pictures of I was like right in the middle of Norfolk. In the hotel that I was in, I could see ships in the shipyard. Like, they weren't quite close enough that I could throw a golf ball across the water. I mean, if I were a big league ball player, I could have hit the ship with a baseball, probably. I couldn't do it, but Reggie Jackson could have. But Wisconsin was right around the corner from that, so I got a chance to go in Wisconsin again. And one of the things that I learned recently from listening to a podcast by a guy named Ryan Szymanski, he's the curator of the Battleship New Jersey exhibit, and I really want to meet this guy. He got asked the question, if they had actually gone and built the Montanas, what modifications did he think they would have made? Because the Montanas were canceled in 1943, and there was they were learning all sorts of stuff during the war, and so the sort of default assumption was that they would make a bunch of mods, and so the question was what would the mods be? And he mentioned something that I had never heard, which was, I knew that all the standard battleships, those old 21-knot, 16-inch gun battleships like the Oklahoma and Nevada and Maryland and all the other ones, the core of the 1920s battle line, I knew that those had all been upgraded. They've been consistently upgraded through the interwar period, and they got World War II refits. I didn't know that somewhere in there they took out the armored conning towers.
Right, you mentioned that.
Oh, I did? Okay.
Yes, you did. Yep. Mm-hmm.
I couldn't remember whether I did or not, but
Yeah. We chatted about that the other day, but that's interesting.
yeah, I've got the typical problem of being an extrovert. I get excited about stuff. I talk to a whole bunch of people and then I can't remember who I talked to about it.
God, yeah. And as I'm looking up, it says I'm looking up why the Montanas were canceled.
Basically, because we had gun superiority, we didn't need them.
Yeah.
I mean, people like to think that it's there's that it's battleships are obsolete, and it's like no, that's really not it. It's really the battleships are really good for gunfire support and for doing battle line stuff if you need to do battle line stuff. But we had built enough battleships with the Iowa class. We had clear superiority in battleships in the Pacific, and we had sunk enough of their stuff that we just didn't have to worry about it anymore, right? And it wasn't that they weren't useful. It's that, especially during wartime, every ship construction decision is not made in a vacuum. The question is, what do you want? What do you need more? And as Wright points out, we needed Essex CVs more. We needed the carriers more than we needed the battleships.
Yeah, that's right. And that's what everything that I'm reading. It's yeah. That matter of fact, I'm reading. There's one great article here, and it basically says the Montanas had little to contribute. Slower than the Iowa class, but carrying roughly the same anti-aircraft armament, they could not perform the carrier escort mission any more effectively. They would, however, take up material and yard space dedicated to carriers and escort ships.
Yeah, so they were going to be expensive. They were also, they were faster than the old standard battleships. They just weren't as fast as the South Dakotas, the North Carolinas, and the
Iowas. Yeah.
So
exactly.
Wright said something about how he needs to see the New Jersey and the Massachusetts. The Massachusetts is the best museum ship I've ever been on, in that because you can go like everywhere in it. And they, a battleship is huge. They got lots of spaces, so they have like little museums inside the battleship.
Oh, so very cool.
So there's like a little section that's dedicated to amphibious operations in the Pacific, and they've got dioramas and all this other stuff. So it's actually really cool. I think I'm going to get a chance to go back there in September, because there's a gaming convention that's going to be held at the Naval War College that I'm going to try to go to. And so that's my plan for that. So let's see. Wright says he was on the Alabama last week. I'm hoping to get to finally see the Alabama in September, if I'm lucky. If this all works out, I'll get to see the Massachusetts again in August, and then in September I'll get to see the Alabama, because I think I have to go down to Montgomery, Alabama for 2 weeks. And I think I'm going to have a day off in between, like a Saturday off that I can zoom down to Mobile.
Oh, that's cool.
So that would work out. So how's the editing process going?
Yeah, editing's good. I just talked to Mark this morning, and about it. We're he's got a couple of small things he's doing to the assembly. So we basically have 2 episodes, right? Episodes 4 and 5.
Okay.
They're technically episodes 4 and 5 because we had titled Prelude to Axanar episode 3, right? Just randomly. There are no episodes 1 and 2 yet. I'm hoping someone else will do those. So episode 4, which is the Gathering Storm, basically leads you up to the Battle of Axanar. Mm-hmm. And listen, I said it last night on Axanar Confidential. There's the saying that they talk about when you talk about writing a movie, you're writing a 3-act structure typically. Yeah. And a 3-act structure is, as they say, it's in Act 1, you run the cat up the tree. On Act 2, you light the tree on fire. And in Act 3, you rescue the cat, right? You save the cat. So one of the 2 big screenwriting books that everyone reads, one is Story by Robert McKee, and the other is called Save the Cat, right? and so we're lighting the tree on fire, right? And Mark and I actually literally spoke about that we're getting to the end of the episode, and we took we took all the footage, so we have 10 out of the 17 characters shot and in the can. So you literally take all that footage, you lay it out on a timeline in your editing program. We drop in everything that we have, right? Now, of course, it's on green screen, so it's not finished or anything. We put in old VFX, just where the VFX are going to be. We'll put ones that we have already just in there, just as placeholders. And then we'll put slugs in for myself or, whatever actors we haven't shot yet, right?
Okay.
But then we record a temp dialogue track. And that temp dialogue track, we lay down a temp dialogue. So you're actually, even if you're not seeing, say, Admiral Threll, the commander of Starfleet, well, we haven't shot him yet. So you see a sketch image from our storyboard artist, and Mark reads the lines. So that way we can pace it out and see how does it work. And once we did that, we were like, okay, things don't work. And you're like, well, we're at 21 minutes. We have to be at 15 minutes. So we got to lose 6 minutes. Now, fortunately, there was one huge scene that just didn't make sense, right? It would have worked great in the movie, but in this, it didn't work. So we took that out and we're trimming it down. And then we've got scenes of Richard Hatch that we're trying to incorporate that were unused in Prelude. He's doing amazing work, and it's a shame not to use the stuff that we didn't use in Prelude. So it's like, okay, what are those lines? And I watched everything. We picked out all the scenes that he was in that we didn't use in Prelude. And I wrote a spreadsheet out with the different lines, and then we were like, well, what lines can we use that make sense? And none of them made sense on their own, but we were like, well, we have this character of Moreau, the Klingon, his Karn's mentor, the previous Supreme Commander, right? We're like, so let's have that character play off of Richard. So we added dialogue for the Klingon. And then you drop that in, and so you basically, now we go back, and I had to rewrite the script. So I took what we assembled and I rewrote the script, and now it works really well. And so we were at the end, and we were like, yeah, this ending, it's not a great cliffhanger. All right, well, what do we need to do? We need to raise the stakes, right? I said, we need to light that tree on fire. That tree is on fire, and the cat's going to die. So we were like, okay. And so we added 2 lines, and then it was a matter of deciding who was going to say those lines. And like one of them was a cut and paste of a line of Garth. And I said, yeah, but I said, Garth shouldn't say that line. And I was like, this character should say that line. And Mark was like, yeah, that'd be perfect. That, cause we know the actor we have for that line, and he has a lot of gravitas. So episode 4 is in a good state right now. Mark's adding some dialogue. I recorded my lines. Crystal recorded Sonia Alexander's lines for this temp track, just so we can drop those in. And now episode 5 is being assembled, and so we're going to go through that process again. So assembly of what we got, then we watch it, and then we change it, and then we rewrite the script, and then we have to go back, and we have to determine what are the VFX we need, right? Yeah. And episode 5 is insane, right? It's the Battle of Axanar, and it's just out of control. So we need to get those. We need to decide, here's the finished script, and then here are the places that we need VFX, and turn it over to our VFX teams and say, knock yourself out, with the whole goal to be done by the end of the year, right? And so so in a great place, and things are really exciting. Well, I can tell you stuff offline.
I'm definitely looking forward to seeing it, because as I tell everybody, like I was a Kickstarter supporter, so I'm in the same boat everybody else is as far as that stuff goes. I'm also kind of looking forward to seeing, I gave you that short document. Do you remember the conversation we were talking about the fleet operations panel?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I can't remember if I told everybody else this, but at one point, Alec is showing me the bridge, and I said, I think I was actually on the set, and you were showing me the bridge, and I said, what's this? And he said, it's the fleet operations panel. And he said, I said, what does it do? And he says, I don't know yet. And I said, I know what it does. You want me to tell you? And so I gave you like 3 pages, I think, sort of my vision of what that
Yeah, because what I knew was that it obviously Garth's in command, and I felt I felt that this panel was represented kind of what an Aegis cruiser represents.
Yeah, and
right.
That
Was what I knew, but I did, and I think, were you the one? And then we had a conversation about the substation that's right in front of it, and like, okay, well, Garth has got to be able to. Garth's not looking at fleet ops. He's got to look at the big. Yeah. So that fleet ops person has got to be able to throw up on the screen the information that the captain needs to see.
Well, if you go back and you look at the original series, I don't think they ever used the displays in the original series the way that they should have, the way that they probably originally intended to, because of course for those, it was a big special effects thing. Now you just throw an LCD panel up and you dump it up there, right? But think about that structure. You've got the captain who's almost in the center of the bridge. He's actually, I think, if I remember correctly, the helm is in the center and he's a little bit back. And he's looking around, and every station has a big screen above it. And so everybody should be putting their status information up on the big screen, and he can do a sweep of the bridge and see all of the information from all of his people at all times. He just needs to look over in their direction. Yeah. You can see it, which is fantastic.
Yes.
The other comment I made, so for everybody else, one of the things I said in this paper was that, Starfleet is by and large not a fleet, which is really kind of funny. They don't operate as a fleet. They're called Starfleet, but they don't operate as a fleet. And so this idea that you're going to actually go into combat and have multiple ships working together isn't really the sort of thing that they're really configured to do. It's not what they do. And so when you start building purpose warships, you start that are intended to do fleet actions, you have to provide for them to be able to communicate in such a way. And, I'm not saying, they got computers that are talking to each other, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not saying that they were totally had no capability, but the ability to add some capability by actually having a dedicated fleet manager. The U.S. Navy does it that way. Back when I was on going to sea. Now, note for the record, last time I went to sea was November 2004. So everything I know is really, really old by now. But back in the day, there was a position called FOTC, Force Over the Horizon Controller. And the ship that had the FOTC responsibilities was the one that was managing the network for everybody. And everybody had a FOTC console in their combat information center so that they could do that stuff. And it was how all that stuff was routed. So they've changed the name of that. I know that they've changed the name of that. I've got a doctrine document somewhere that talks about what they changed it to, but I don't remember what they called it.
Yeah, well, I was just fascinated by, by the ability of one ship to control the defense of, or weaponry of other ships, right? I think there's, I think if we're talking 300 years from now, everything we know about everything that we have seen in Star Trek so far is not the way it's going to work.
No,
right? You and I have talked about this ad nauseum. But the input of a captain into, when you're going to fire phasers is that's not the way it's going to happen. Right.
The way I kind of look at it is, Gene Roddenberry famously said that they're all astronauts, so they're all officers.
Yeah, right.
And, okay, let's roll with that. They're all officers because they're the decision makers. The crew is the ship or the ship's computer, right? So I think that when Worf is back there, a big chunk of what he's doing is that he's sort of making, he's making inputs into the computer. It just looks like he's firing stuff.
Right.
In the
right.
same way that, most of the time, Wesley is putting in inputs that are basically the equivalent of programming the autopilot.
Right. Right.
So,
yeah. I think, if Picard wants to disable a ship, Worf is not targeting the engines of the ship, right? The computer is targeting the engines of the ship.
Yeah.
Worf just saying target the engine of the ship, right?
Yeah.
That's basically it. So I just think that thinking about it, ultimately the way these battles will be fought in 300 years, if that was our future, that we're not even, it's who knows how it's going to be. Listen, there was a novel I read 30 years ago, in which it was positing thought controlled weapon systems on like an F-16. It was like, we're not the idea being we're not that far away from that.
Was this Firefox by Craig Thomas?
No, it wasn't Firefox. It was another book,
Okay.
and it was before Firefox, and I bet I still have the book around somewhere.
Yeah, because Firefox came out in 1970 something. I did a book report on it when I was in 6th grade, and the thing I remember about it was it had a thought-controlled weapon system, but you had to think in Russian.
I know. Yeah, I was like, oh, yeah, I know. I was like, that's not the way thought control is probably going to work. But anyway, whatever. So I just, So, but again, we don't know what it would be like in 300 years, right?
Yeah.
We can posit, but our assumption of the future is always wrong, right? Yeah. So it doesn't matter what we posit at this point. That's where you get into entertainment. So let's make it interesting, but let's not go over it. One of the interesting things I heard was I heard that there was a lot of negative feedback about the holographic controls in La Sirena in the first season of Picard. That a lot of people were like, "Oh, well, that's not Star Trek. That's Minority Report." And
Those people need to get a life.
I know, right? Just like, really, that's what you were worried about? But I don't care one way or another. That's an interesting way to go. And then again, looking now at Picard season 3, the Titan is I think that bridge is pretty, that's pretty interesting. I'm loving all the control panels and everything. Although I still think the bridge is way too big.
But the bridges are too big and they're sort of garishly lighted. I mean, I get a headache even thinking about trying to work in that environment. Every time you turn around, you're staring into a spotlight.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I know it's kind of crazy. So getting back to weapon systems, it's like, we needed to have, and we really, even in the script, we don't really get into what that panel, what that control station, that fleet ops does, right? I just think that that as opposed to what Cisco does in Deep Space Nine, where he says, "Tell the fleet to do this," and he's talking to the comms officer, right?
Yeah.
In Axanar, Garth is giving orders of what the fleet is to do to the fleet ops officer. And he's inputting it. So how does, is he telling the computers on those ships what to do? I don't know.
And a big chunk of it is probably also if it's giving him status information on the status of the fleet, right? If you're all plugged in, you shouldn't have to be getting verbal damage reports. You just look at the screen and it tells you who's in the network and what their current status is. It's like, oh, those guys are having a bad day. We should probably try to protect them some.
And also, if we have, you've got to assume that there's AI.
Yeah.
Right. And if that's the case, and this gets back to, this is the point that you have made over and over and over. And the point is that here's Garth's plan, right? And we lay out what Garth's plan is in episode 4, right? And Garth tells you that here's the plan, right?
Mhm.
And we're going to do this, this, and this. The Klingons are going to do this because, and so if what has happened is before we get to this point, Garth they have put all this information in the computers. We're going to have this many ships. The Klingons are going to come with this many ships, we think, right? And this is the arena we're playing in, and here's what's going to happen. And it's like playing chess, right? And it's like two computers playing chess. Boom, 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 boom. It's war games, right? That's what it is. And it's like, here's your result. And so the computers that are, Garth's computer on the USS Ares has as well as all the ships in the fleet, have all the information, and they've run this scenario 1 million times. I would think.
They've got branches and sequels. They've got alternatives. It's just a matter of saying, like,
it's almost a flowchart.
Pick Alpha 4, right? Execute Alpha 4.
Right. And so it's going to react, and Garth's going to be given options, and Garth doesn't have to know that if these two ships get destroyed, these ships got to move up. Garth doesn't have to deal with that. The computer's dealing with that. And the computer they've already gamed this out. So if those two ships get destroyed, the computer system, I would think the fleet ops system, is giving orders to those two ships to move up.
Well, and if they've all got mission type orders, they may not wait, right? Because like in the interwar period, for instance, the destroyer COs and the light cruiser COs, I mean, they were told, don't wait for a signal from the flag. You know what to do. So the destroyer leader, whoever was running the destroyers, his job was look for the right time to attack and then do your thing.
Yeah.
And don't wait for me to tell you because I'm busy managing the battle.
Right. Yeah. So yeah.
If everybody knows the plan, everybody's well drilled. I mean, this is why Nelson kept having his captains over for dinner, so that they all understood exactly what he wanted them to do. They all learned how each other thought. They could do all that stuff, and you didn't have to be specific.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I agree. Hearing Cisco issuing orders is more dramatic and draws the audience in, etc.
Right.
I understand why that stuff happens. The part that I always go back to the example of Babylon 5, which is a show I absolutely adore. But there's a right way and there's a wrong way to do stuff like that. The problem you run into in Babylon 5 is you have Sheridan issuing orders that he shouldn't have to issue because he's telling them to do things that they should already know to do. Now, in his defense, in that one scene where we see him do it, it is a force that has lots of different people from different races all working together. They're not usually under a unified command. But on the other hand, they had a month to pull it all together. And I know what I would do if I was in that situation. I would say, okay, all you captains need to get together, and I take my senior captains aside and say, I need a common doctrine for these guys. You guys all need to talk about who does what in what circumstance.
Right.
I mean, the U.S. Navy has a doctrine manual that it has just to give to people that we're doing exercises with, so that we're all on the same page. It's like, we're going to do it this way. Here is the book that you guys need to do it with. It's funny, there's a NATO doctrine manual that we wrote a long, long time ago, but we don't actually use it in our day-to-day. And so when we go participate with NATO, Standing Naval Forces Atlantic was the specific example I heard of. It's not unusual for the foreign commander to be giving the US CO, like, you're not doing things right. It's 3:00. You owe me a report at 3:00. Where's my report?
Yeah. So I think that again, I think that's the important thing is that so much has already been gamed out, right? In certainly, like in this case, Battle of Axanar, right? We're not talking about Picard runs into an alien spaceship he's never seen before. Different situation. Although they still probably game that. But this is a case where, much closer to a World War II scenario where you got the Federation, your ships, their capabilities. The enemy, their ships, their capabilities. You're guessing on how many they have. The place you're going to be fighting, what you're going to be doing. And so you're taking educated guesses about what the enemy is going to do. And so all of that is worked in to minimize the work then that the captain has to do in reacting to things.
Yeah. But you know what? There's actually something really interesting about what they did in the interwar period when they war gamed it all out. So up in Newport, they basically had two different kinds of games that they did up in Newport. There was a lot of overlap, but they had the games that they did to educate naval officers. And then they had the games that were really more about trying to figure out what plans would work in terms of a strategic plan going across the Pacific. For those games with the naval officers, 1 year, it's like you'd talk to a naval student, one of the officer students, and he'd say, "Oh yeah, the torpedoes are incredibly deadly. Gunfire isn't nearly as bad. The torpedoes are really deadly." You talk to a guy from the next year, he says, "Oh, the gunfire is just murderous. The torpedoes are pretty ineffectual, but the gunfire is murderous." They change the numbers each year because the purpose of this was to get these officers to be able to analyze the situation, understand what's working and what wasn't, and adapt accordingly. And pretty much everybody who fought in World War II that was like commander or above was a graduate of that program. Like, I think all the flag officers were graduates except for two of them, all the admirals in the Pacific, except for like two.
Wow.
Of them. They all went through the war college. And so they'd all been through that experience before. And it's sort of, it's the Kobayashi Maru in its own way, right? Everybody's done the Kobayashi Maru. It's something they can all talk about. In this case, everybody fought Japan. And so that's why Nimitz famously said that the only thing that surprised them was the kamikaze. And that gets interpreted as sort of like, we understood the strategic situation. I think he's talking more about the sort of tactical level of everything that we ever saw in the war that got thrown at us is something that came out, we saw it on the game floor in Newport, except they never did kamikazes. Right.
Didn't know that was coming.
Yeah, it actually took the Japanese command staff a long time kamikazes were suggested like 2 years before they were implemented, but it was viewed at the time as being defeatist. Then when they decided that they were going to have to do it, they took like another 6 months to a year before they got to the point, because they figured they had to sort of prep the information battle space about it. They had to sort of like, let's play up the entire idea of samurai and et cetera, et cetera. They knew that it was going to be there were going to be some morale implications of it on the home front. And so they needed to sort of prep for the home front for that. Wright has a good comment there. Let me find it. Admiral Lee's gun club was the next level, postgraduate level discussion while underway. Yeah, he is Admiral. There's a biography of Willis Lee that came out called Battleship Admiral that I own but have not yet had the chance to read. He was just phenomenal. He's my favorite admiral of the war.
And to draw a Star Trek, it's kind of like in the episode where they go into the Delta Quadrant with the Odyssey, and the Odyssey is destroyed because a Jem'Hadar ship makes a kamikaze run at them. And wasn't expecting that. It's kind of the thing. I think the thing that is also interesting, and I wonder if you were someone who's actually played the FASA games, it'd be interesting to understand how the different races, how the different races fought. Like, so did the human race fight differently than the Klingon race, fight differently than the Romulans, fight differently than the Gorn, right? That's a very, because everything is different. I mean, look at the difference between the way NATO fights and the Soviets fight. It's totally different. So you got to believe different worlds would have different ways of fighting.
Yeah, and like I didn't play the FOSSA game enough to have a particularly good understanding of that. I only played it a couple of times, and I played it double blind at the Origins Gaming Convention one time, and took a great risk that didn't quite win out for me. But it was looking really good there for a while. I was able to fake somebody out and using a planet because it was double blind. And so I used a planet so that he saw me coming around one way, but I had saved enough energy that I could like do a radical course change. And as he came around the other side of the planet to get me, all of a sudden I'm on his tail and he's got no shields there. The problem is I didn't quite roll well enough to get him because it was going to end up being a 1-on-2. And so I basically needed to take that guy out with one shot so that I could then turn to deal with the other guy on a more equal basis. I didn't quite get him taken out with one shot. It wasn't clear to me that I didn't get him because it's double blind. I don't know what damage he's got. And I was in a situation where I knew that the other guy was a fresh ship coming down on me. And I knew that I had to turn to face him or I was dead. And so I turned to face him and the first guy managed to get off a shot and kill me. So I got a standing ovation for it.
Yeah. What I'm talking about is culturally,
yeah.
How do races fight differently? Is there more teamwork involved? Is it more of a solo thing? Is it, is it more aggressive or more passive? Is it, I think that's really, and that is something, listen, that is something I think I'm referring to, just if you look at, if any of you play Warhammer 40,000 like I do, every race is different, and they're different, not just because their weaponry is different, but they're different because their characteristics are different, right? Their initiative, look at their initiative factor is different. Their toughness is their strength. All those things weigh into how they fight. And then even within a race, you have different units that fight differently, right? And, when I first started playing Warhammer 25 years ago, I was playing one army, the Dark Angels, that's a shooty army. But I am a pretty aggressive guy, and I was always trying to charge my Dark Angels across the field, and I was getting slaughtered. So I switched to Blood Angels, which is an aggressive, in-your-face, hand-to-hand army, and I started doing a lot better. So and that's just within the human race. What about, when you start talking about alien races, everyone's different, and how it's not just what kind of weapons you have or what kind of ships you have. It's who you are as a race determines how you fight, right? And so that's something at the end of the Battle of Axanar is at the end of the 4 Years' War. So each side has at least learned about how the other side fights. Now, one of the things we learned is how Karn says that you never knew who you were fighting, because we're fighting Klingons. Klingons are fighting Terrans, Andorians, Vulcans, Tellarites, right? So, and a Tellarite's going to fight very differently than a human's going to fight.
Yeah, and my personal hypothesis is, and I'm looking forward to seeing the show, but my personal hypothesis is that we think of the Federation as being this united thing, but all of our data points are majority human ships. Right? We don't know what it's like to be on a Vulcan ship. We don't know what it's like to be an Andorian ship. And I suspect that during the time of the Axanar, that those differences were probably a bigger deal. So the question is, if the Andorian ships are designed by Andorians and crewed by Andorians, how do they compare to the other ships? We see some of that in the FOSSA game because they specifically talked about this is an Andorian design. That means it's really heavy on photon torpedoes because they like photon torpedoes, right? And if you go back to GDW's Third World War game, I remember I was on a mailing list one time and somebody was saying, oh yeah, the Soviets just suck. The Soviet Air Force is horrible, blah, 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 blah. And somebody went, tell me what you're trying to do with them. And the guy explained it, and he said, I see your problem. You're playing them like they're Americans. You need to play them like they're Soviets. So you're trying to make it work that way. You can't play the Americans like they're Soviets, and you can't play the Soviets like they're Americans. It just doesn't work, because people buy the forces that fits in with their doctrine. And we saw that happen in battleship construction right before World War II. Our doctrine changed, so we bought different forces.
How did the doctrine change?
Well, we decided to put more of a premium on speed. And, it's probably a little bit of an overstatement that the doctrine changed. The big thing that changed was the Washington Naval Treaty went away. And so we could make the ships enough bigger that we were able to increase the size of the ship and sort of maintain the same protection. But we really just didn't care about speed beforehand, because our thought was, Mahan, we believe in Mahan. We want to force a war, a decisive battle. So we'll go and threaten something that they'll have to defend. They believe in Mahan also, so they want to force a decisive battle. The people that were most likely to fight were, like the Japanese, were big into Mahan. And so they believe in the decisive battle too. So what exactly does this speed get us? It's not that speed is unimportant. It's that it's less important than armor and guns and building reliable ships. We had really reliable ships that were relatively easy to maintain compared to some of the others. They were very, very tough. They had good armor. They had good firepower. And we standardized on the 16-inch gun early. The Brits kept having to creep up to it, but we standardized on, we only need 21 knots and we want 16-inch guns. And so the Brits had this situation where, in the Japanese also, where they had ships of all different speeds. Well, how fast does a 27-knot ship go? It goes 21 knots if it's in a formation with a 21-knot ship.
Right.
So
right.
Now, it'd be nice if you had some faster ships that you could put at the vanguard of the line and use them to sort of like cut off the other guy's line and force him to bend and, get in front of them. It's useful to have fast, powerful forces, but we just resigned ourselves to the fact that we weren't going to have fast, powerful forces. And we decided that we were going to be really, really sneaky and neutralize their fast, powerful forces by, instead of doing, ending up doing this, we were going to go this way. And now their vanguard's out of position and is scrambling to get back in the fight.
Oh, interesting.
And so we spent a lot of time practicing that. Landing talks like we're going to go this way, but Trent Hone has documented the fact that the plan was to go the other direction, and that was like totally secret at the time. And so the idea was that we were even, as we're coming in, we were even going to do a head fake in one direction, let them react to it, and then go the other way.
Oh, interesting.
So, and we confirmed after the war that the Japanese did indeed think we were going to end up on parallel courses. I don't know if the Brits ever told us what their assumption was about us, but at some point we decided we weren't going to fight the Brits.
I just took this out today to show a friend. I don't know if anyone has seen this movie, The Great War of Archimedes. It's a Japanese movie.
I've heard of it. I've never seen it.
Oh my God. Go get it right now. You can get this on Amazon, or it may be available. There you go. Or it may be available on some streaming service. It is absolutely fantastic, and it's about it's about building the Yamato. And it is a fantastic movie. Absolutely outstanding. You'll love it.
Yeah. It sounds good.
Yeah. So go check it out.
I definitely need to do that. Stephen Ross points out, in GDW's 2300, each nationality fought differently as characterized by what kinds of navies they built. For instance, the Germans built really tough ships that were pretty slow. The U.S. had the fastest ship in that universe in the Kennedy class. We called it, everybody else called it a battle cruiser. We called it a fast missile ship or something like that. We used a totally different number.
And what is GDW's 2300 AD?
So this was a role-playing game that was it originally came out as Traveler 2300. It then, because they were going to try to use Traveler to mean science fiction RPG. And then, strangely enough, when you name something Traveler 2300, people think it's set in the Traveler universe in the year 2300 when it's an entirely different universe. So they finally got a clue about that. I think it was dumb for them to call it that. They got a clue about it, and they stopped calling it Traveler 2300 and just renamed it 2300 AD. There was a 2320 that was done by somebody else, and Mongoose has done. They're on their second edition of Traveler of 2300, which means there's now I think a total of 5 editions of this, and it's based upon the background is the Twilight 2000 background, where NATO got involved in a nuclear war, a limited nuclear war, in sort of recovery about it. And we basically think all the stuff that was in the Star Trek background before Zefram Cochrane came around. That sort of happened, but in their own background. And eventually we sort of claw our way back. And it's unique in that Earth is not united, but everybody has starships. And so the Germans have reunified. The French basically screwed over NATO, and as a result, they didn't get nuked in the same way because they just decided to sit the war out. And so the French are the superpower. The US for a long time had 2 different governments, MilGov and CivGov, and only recently reunited. There's also a little thing, it drives me crazy when people say US Space Force, because that's not what it's called in the book. It's called the ASF, American Space Force. All the places where you or I would naturally say US, they say American.
Huh, okay.
Because the nomenclature's just changed in 300 years. And I'm not even sure America is still the United States at this point. The country may have been renamed because it basically, MilGov and CivGov, and it basically fell apart and they had to put it back together again. But the Kennedy class missile cruiser is the fastest ship in space, kind of has a glass jaw. The Germans are really, really tough ships, but they've got generally pretty minimalistic fire control and stuff. There was a board game version of it too called Star Cruiser.
Interesting.
So it's one of my favorite backgrounds. I love it.
Interesting. All right, I'm looking on the Wikipedia page. I'm gonna have to check it out and read it. That looks interesting.
Yeah, and there's a great website called Etranger that hasn't been updated in forever. It's done by a guy who I believe was a serving British Army officer that has this all sorts of wonderful fanfic buried in articles about stuff. Because there was a particular battle out on the French arm fighting the aliens, the Kafirs, and they basically there was a multinational force that was basically kind of trapped there. And it wasn't so much that they were trapped, it's that they couldn't leave because there were populated colonies. And so they're defending these populated worlds. And it ends up that everybody basically just turns over their forces to the Ukrainian admiral because he's just brilliant. And so they talk about how, and with this act, the CO of the most powerful German ship turned over his command to a foreigner. Nobody in the fleet would bat an eye about this, although back home it would have caused them all to go apoplectic. Because they just basically said, we trust each other. And so it's sort of like ABDA was in World War II when they threw that scratch force together. The difference is these guys don't get wiped out to the last man like ABDA almost did.
Interesting. Very cool.
Yeah,
very
so
cool.
2300 is a lot of fun. Unfortunately, there's only one novel I know of in the 2300 universe, and it's like a ground pounder thing, and I really don't care about ground pounders.
Well, I'll definitely read up on it. It sounds, it sounds interesting. Sounds interesting. So, well, what else we got on? Anything else on tap or?
The only thing I was gonna mention is the fact that I bought the Leagues of Votan manual way back.
Oh
when it
yeah,
first
yeah.
came out, I still haven't read it. I got it like right around Thanksgiving, and I still haven't had a chance to read it.
I see that now Warhammer's all about what is it? The arcs of what is it? I forget. There's another story that they're working their way through, but it doesn't seem to change the universe that much. But they
there was talk of, I think one of the Trader Primarchs came back, if I remember correctly.
I don't think, is there a new one? Angron. I think Angron is the one who's been around. The Trader Primarchs are all around. It's just who they're featuring at any given time. Over the past few years, they featured Magnus and they featured Mortari, and then they had models for them. It's about who they're bringing out the new model for, basically.
Yeah. Did you see that there's a Homeworld game on Kickstarter? In fact, I think it's still on Kickstarter. If it is, it finishes almost like now. Let me check real quick.
No, what's that?
So let's see, 16 hours to go. So remember the old Homeworld computer game?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Let me check this out.
Homeworld, you'd probably recognize the ship if you saw it. It looked like a giant banana.
Okay.
The mothership was kind of goofy looking, but it was a really cool idea. It started out as a proposal to do a Battlestar Galactica game back in the 90s, and they couldn't get the rights to do Battlestar Galactica, so they said, we're just going to do our own thing. And so the premise is that these nomadic people that had sort of finally built a technological civilization find the crashed starship that had brought their ancestors to their planet, which was significant for them because they did not know that they had come to the planet on a crashed starship. And so they figure out where they are, and they figure out, based upon stuff in the starship, where their homeworld was, and they decide to go back there. And right before they launch to go back there, they build this mothership, and they're going to go back. And right before they launch to go back, they're subjected to a surprise attack, and basically everybody on the planet is killed. So the survivors of the race are in the mothership, and they're trying to go back to where their ancestors came from. And there's a reason why somebody came gunning for them, and it was because they violated a treaty that they didn't even remember even know that their ancestors had signed.
Oh, wow.
They didn't develop starships because they had been on the losing side of a war, multiple millennia ago.
Interesting.
And so they came out with a Homeworld RPG about 6 months or so ago, maybe a little bit longer. And then this is the Homeworld board game. And I basically just gave them my entire paycheck for like 3 months. So
gosh, yeah.
I think with shipping, it's going to end up being the most expensive game I've ever purchased, because I basically decided to get everything.
They're the same people who do Tales from the Loop. They're also going to be doing the Walking Dead TTRPG, as well as a few others. Okay. By the way, it's Modifius.
Yeah, it's Modifius. Cool. So cool. Modifius is also the people that do the Dune RPG. Oh, okay. And they're the people that do Star Trek Adventures.
They also do the Alien RPG.
Yeah. No, they don't. I don't think they do. I think that's somebody else. I could be wrong. So the rest of you can't see it, but I can see that Lissa is looking intently because she's researching whether it is. I think it's somebody else, and I can't remember their name off the top of my head.
I think that's my buddy that does Alien, the Alien RPG. Drew Gaska does that.
I just mixed them up with a different company. That's what it is.
Yeah. So, but Modifius has done a bunch of stuff. They've done a bunch of stuff. So let's see. Homeworld is one of the things that I've gone to YouTube and somebody has strung together all the cutscenes from Homeworld. And so it's like 6 hours of just background cutscene stuff. So
I was trying to see. I could have sworn it.
The list of things that they have horror games, such as Achtung Cthulhu. They've got like 3 different Cthulhu games: Cult, Liminal, Vaesen Nordic Horror Roleplay. Sci-fi wise, they've got Dune, Fallout, Homeworld, Star Trek, Ironsworn, Starforge, Agents of Concordia, Alien RPG. So no, I didn't mix them up. So Blade Runner, Corellius, Dishonored, Fragged Empire, Judge Dredd, Infinity, Mutant Year Zero, Stargate, SG-1, Tales from the Loop, Spy Game, Twilight 2000, Black Void, Cohorse Cthulhu, Conan, Dishonored, Forbidden Lands, John Carter, Legends of Avalon, Morkborg, which is one that a lot of people know, Odyssey of Dragonlords, Out of the Ashes, Raiders of the Serpent Sea, Symbarium, The One Ring. They also have a VTT, and they've got quite a few others. I did link their page in there. They are also coming out with a Walking Dead TTRPG, which, fun fact, I will be on the official actual play of, by the way.
Now, this is weird because I'm looking and it says that I went to Drive Through RPG and it's got Free League Publishing listed as the Alien RPG.
Which is one of their subsidiaries.
Ah, okay. I did not realize that. That's actually, I need to make sure that I tell people that. Because we were actually talking about this just the other day about Free League versus Modiphius, and now somebody said Modiphius distributes it for Free League. I could see that happening too. There's some, it's movies get all sorts of complicated by somebody told me that, or I was reading somewhere that, or maybe it was on a YouTube video that, how'd that work out? The people who own the rights to do Lord of the Rings stuff aren't the people that own the rights to distribute it.
What?
Yeah, it was. I think it was Lord of the Rings. It was some big property that the distribution rights and the production rights were in 2 different companies' hands, and so you'd all have to be on board before you decided to make a movie, because you could find yourself having made a movie that you then couldn't publish or couldn't distribute.
That would suck.
Movie making is just weird, as you know.
Yeah, I was just saying, yeah, is it?
So we should probably think about wrapping this up soon, but I did want to, going back to like 45 minutes ago, I was going to ask you, have you read any of Stephen Pressfield's stuff?
No. What has he written?
So Stephen Pressfield he was a screenwriter whose biggest accomplishment in screenwriting was the movie King Kong Lives, starring Linda Hamilton.
Oh my God.
He then turned into a novelist. He had sort of been a novelist originally, didn't really get anything published, switched over to screenwriting, went back to being a novelist because he had this idea for a book about golf called The Legend of Bagger Vance.
Oh, wow.
And his agent, apparently they still can't agree, 30 years later, who fired who. But his agent basically said, what are you doing to me? You've got this career going and you're going to drop it all so that you can do a damn golf book. He also did the novel Gates of Fire. And he's done several books on screenwriting and story writing and stuff, novel writing, and things along those lines. And they're just fascinating. He talks about resistance as if it were a malevolent entity that is actively trying to subvert you.
Okay.
And about how you have to slay resistance to get stuff done, etc. But he also talks about where the legend of Bagger Vance came from, and about all the instances where people in Hollywood and people who are writing novels just basically just stole something. When he did the Legend of Bagger Vance, the most logical place that you would put a novel about golf would be like in the 1700s in Scotland. But somebody else had already done that. There's a scene in that golf novel that is lifted like almost word for word out of Plato. It's the scene where Alcibiades goes to the dinner party. And it's just blatantly lifted out of Plato. And if you've read Plato, you go, oh yeah, I remember that. But apparently the author just never mentions it. So then
I figured it out.
Yeah.
So Modifius is the distributor for the English versions of their books.
Oh yeah, because Freely is a German
actually
company.
Swedish.
Oh, they're Swedish?
They're Swedish because their website has the option to change from English to Swedish.
Okay.
So they're a
Maybe
Swedish company.
I thought they were German.
They are the American distributor and the English producer of the books.
Cool. But Pressfield, in one of the books, he does the thing that he says, don't any of you ever do this. And he tells you exactly where everything in Bagger Vance was stolen from.
Really?
It's an Indian legend. In the original, the golfer was a charioteer. And he talks about how he found this famous golf tournament that took place in the 1930s, and he sort of like, okay, he appropriated that, and added everything else like that. It was really kind of nifty. Huh. And I've seen him interviewed a lot. He was anytime anybody does anything about the Spartans, he gets interviewed, and he's somebody I'd like to meet. So,
gotcha. Oh, what is someone? Oh, is Axanar? Is that Lissa? Okay.
So,
gotcha.
Let's see. There was something else I was gonna. I'm trying to remember what. Oh yeah, my brother pointed out a long time ago that I never said in this episode that I don't speak for my employer.
Oh, that's okay. It's been scrolling around the bottom of the screen since the beginning. So
that's why I think you're covered. Is because I realized I
think you're covered.
Yeah, it's always good that I say that though. At some point, I'm waiting for my employer to discover that I do this and have them come and wag their finger at me. At which point, I'm going to say, "Oh, okay. So, what exactly is your opinion on starships?"
Right, exactly.
So I can.
It is called Starship Tactical. You realize,
Yeah. God, so it's not.
Gosh.
And I don't work for Space Force, so.
All right. Well, are we about to wrap things up?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think Lissa threw that up. It sort of depends on what you mean by. I actually sort of reject the premise of the Kobayashi Maru test. The idea that you have to have a no-win test for people to understand what it's like. I'm not convinced that anyone that I've ever met in uniform hasn't already done a lot of thinking about what it would be like to die in that uniform. But I could be wrong about that. That's actually a question that I should ask. I know a lot of people who are and were in uniform. I should ask them about that because I'm not fully qualified for that. But that does remind me of my absolute favorite episode of anything that came out of the franchise is Yesterday's Enterprise. And there's that scene in Yesterday's Enterprise where Tasha Yar is asking for permission to transfer over to Enterprise C. And one of the things she said was, when I put on this uniform, I knew there was a chance I was going to die in it. I'd really like that to mean something.
Yep. TJ, I don't even know what you're talking about here. Can someone explain this to me?
Yeah, TJ, what are you talking about?
It seems a little out of context. So let me know. So you say Turtle Dove, and I'm assuming you mean Harry Turtle Dove in his alternate history novels, which I find are a little thick myself.
Some of them aren't subtle.
They're also too long. I tried to read this series where Earth gets invaded during World War II, and it was just it was just uh, it was I finally
Well,
gave up. I was finally like, okay, yeah, too many characters I don't give a shit about.
I think that was. I think that was him responding to the market. I suspect that what was going on there was a bunch of people had said, "Hey, why don't you do a series?" And probably his publisher said that too. And so he went, "Okay, I can do a series." As he
Yeah.
puts it, because I've never been on a panel with him, but I've been at science fiction conventions and seen panels with him. And as he puts it, I tell lies for a living. They have to be good lies, or my children don't have shoes. Now, he was saying that 20 some years ago, so his children probably are all graduated from college by now. But
Yeah, I mean, I read, I think Guns of the South was one of his first books,
yeah,
and I read that and I loved it. It was great. But once he got into the World War books, that I just, oh wow, I just found them incredibly, I don't know, bloated. They were just bloated to me. I just, I didn't need to know all the nuances that he was trying to give us. Um, so, and I love alternate history. I think it's great. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Harry Harrison's Stars and Stripes series, but it's a trilogy. That's
yep,
it. It's a trilogy, and all the characters in it, you know who they are. They're all famous. It's all famous historical figures, and we're not dealing with incidental tertiary characters that that you don't care about. That's what I loved about that those three books. I need to go back and read them again because they were such fast reads too.
okay. So TJ explained what's going on here. It's this is over at the alt history forum, I think it is. One of the entries in the space tech and technology category is A Sound of Thunder: The Rise of the Soviet Super Booster. And he later goes on to say that that's the category that he and Rob won last year for their story Boldly Going. And the people on that mailing or on that forum, they it's not, they don't do what if Spartacus had a Piper Cub sort of stuff. It's they don't do Guns of the South type stuff. It's all firmly based in realistic extrapolations of stuff, based upon what the actual program, basically like when TJ and Rob do something, somebody somewhere suggested it. They don't just come up with something. It's like, what if we built this? We could have built A and we could have built B and we chose A. What if we had built B instead? What are the implications of building B? Like at one point there was talk about the Air Force having its own Gemini program to service satellites. What if Air Force flew Gemini and kept on flying Gemini until like the early 1990s?
Wow.
And that sort of stuff. So there's some really, really nifty stuff over there. And, I need more stuff to read. Like I need a hole in the head. I just bought the, earlier today on Drive Through RPG, I bought the, trying to remember what they call it. I think it's the Houses of the Landsrod. It's the Great Houses supplement for the Dune RPG.
Oh God.
So it's got the Landsrad and Chome and the Spacing Guild and all the other stuff.
I got to tell you, I read the other day. I'm never going to read Dune ever. It's not on my. It's not even on. It's not even in the top 100 books I have any interest in reading. No interest whatsoever. So I started reading a summary. There was somewhere I just read. It went through all the books and just told you in detail, reasonable detail what was happening. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? I'm like, I have less than no interest in reading these books now. As a matter of fact, I wish I hadn't spent the last 15 minutes reading about every one of the books, because that's 15 minutes I'll never get back. I'm just going through and going, oh, Christ, really? This is depressing. Why would I want to read this stuff and get this fucking depressed? So
I understand where you're coming from. I would argue that the first book is one of those must reads. And the second and third one, I mean the original Dune. I don't mean the prequel shit. I mean the
Right.
original
Yeah,
Dune.
yeah.
The second and third one, Dune Messiah and Children of Dune, are very good also. Everything else you can flush. Just flush it.
I mean, I was just reading it. I'm just going, oh my God, it's just one book of misery after another. Not why I do reading.
Yeah, there's a lot. Well, okay, dude, you play 40K. I mean, the Dune universe is happy, happy, joy, joy compared to 40K.
Yeah. Ain't that the truth? I was just watching a video by one of the top 40K YouTubers. And it is Tau versus the Imperium. And it was basically breaking it down. And he's basically, he says like, look, the Imperium's 1,000,000 worlds. The Tau got about 100. He says in the Imperium, it is just, he says, you're going to live in misery in a hive city and probably die under some big machine cog in a manufactorium. And you're going to be hungry the whole time and miserable. The Tau, it's all bright and shiny, and you got food on your table every night. And it's pretty damn good.
Although they had to add, because they always do this, right? It's Games Workshop. They always do this. The Tau basically really came off as the good guys, and then they did another rev, and they added this secret manipulation that takes place behind the scenes, and okay, they're still the good guys. I mean, somebody made the observation that the Tau are clearly the good guys in 40K. They would be considered absolute evil in the Star Trek universe. And there's a lot of truth to that. I always thought, so 20 years ago, I thought, or when they first introduced the Tau, I thought that
about 20 years ago.
I thought at some point what Games Workshop should do, if they ever decided that they wanted to like kick the can over and reboot, the way to do it is the Emperor finally dies. And when he reincarnates on a Tau world, and he goes, wait a minute, you kept me alive for 20,000 years. Don't you understand the Necrons are coming and we need to deal with that? And the Tyranids are coming and we need to deal with that. What the hell did you guys do? And because there's that bit of the lore that says that there's this box that the Grandmaster of the Grey Knights has.
Right. The Doomsday box. Whatever it's called.
The Terminus degree.
That
when you get to the point where there's no hope, open the box
right,
and do what the Terminus degree tells you.
Right.
I think the Terminus degree says kill the Emperor.
That's what I think too. It's so funny because I just was maybe it was in one of the YouTube videos I just watched, and I just learned that last week, and I go, I can't think of anything that the Terminus box would say other than make sure the Emperor dies.
Yeah.
That's the only hope. The only hope. Right? Because what else could it say?
And I think what happens at that point, Vulcan built something called the Talisman of the Seven Hammers. It's built into the Golden Throne, which is widely considered to be a doomsday device. So I think what happens is the Emperor dies, the throne goes, oh, he's dead, boom. And when that happens, it's basically the last resort way of sealing a warp breach. If the webway terminal in the basement of the palace, if they lose control and chaos starts coming through to Earth, it's their way of it's their doomsday device to sort of to blow that hole closed, and it'll take Earth with it. And then the Emperor reincarnates in a Tau world and becomes the first human to lead the Tau Empire.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I think that the most important thing, the most important thread in all of Warhammer 40K, in my opinion, the most important concept is that in order for chaos to be defeated, the human race must die. That's it. That's the most important thing. They revealed that, of course, in the Horus Heresy novel
with the Cabal.
With the Cabal, and you were like, oh, and this is why the Alpha Legion, turned to chaos, to ensure that Horus would win. And it's like it is but it kind of goes along with the fact that the human race doesn't deserve to survive. There's way more worthy, and the Tower, the perfect example of a way more worthy race, and listen, the Eldar are headed to destruction. They're going to die out. And why? Because they created Slanesh. They don't deserve to live, and so, and the great big baddie, I have a lot more respect for the Necrons now, but the great big baddie is the Tyranids. The Tyranids are going to devour everything. As a matter of fact, the Tyranids may have conquered every other galaxy in the universe, yes. And we're just the last one. So it's, when you think of all this, it's like, wow, just get it over with, guys. Because having stated that in that book about the Cabal, we have never found nothing has changed in 40K to let you think that the human race is not on a slow descent into extinction. That's like,
yeah. The interesting thing about the Cabal is, the Cabal basically got torched later on, and the question I would have is sort of the same question that the characters in the story had, which is, I'd really kind of like to see your sourcing on all this stuff, right? So you tell me that all this stuff is true, but why should we believe that you've put it all together that way? And Ulthwé didn't seem to buy it, right? He was one of the guys that was going after the Cabal. And so if he's not on board with it, why should anybody else be at this point?
Yeah, don't disagree. That was always the question. That was always the question. What if it's how do we know what they say is true?
Yeah. But I mean, that's the big thing about 40K from beginning to end, is that it's endlessly rewritten. Somebody, trying to remember who it was. One of the, I think it's Luton09, who's got a channel that I really, really like when it comes to this stuff. He basically said, I'm not even going to, the entire idea of talking about retconning in the context of 40K doesn't really make any sense, because retconning sort of implies that there was something that was correct that you're then, changing to make it more correct in some other way, right? I mean, the Games Workshop people have never put anything in stone. They set the precedent fairly early on that we're going to constantly retell these stories, with the excuse being, it happened 20,000 years ago. Give me the documentation you've got for what happened 20,000 years ago, right?
Right.
It's all a matter of interpretation. There are tens of hundreds of trillions of people in the Imperium. There was something I was listening to just yesterday or the other day where it's like, there are entire worlds where people don't think that there are Xenos. They think it's just a legend because they've never met one, because no alien has ever come to their world. And so they don't believe that aliens actually exist.
Yeah.
Let alone that they're trying to eat you.
Yeah. Right. All right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's, of course, it's all fiction. So, whatever. I actually, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Wilhelm asked the question, I read that the Emperor was created when every psychic drank poison and he was born. Is this true? That is in one of the Realms of Chaos books. So this is something that dates back to like 1991-ish, 1990-ish. And so maybe that's one of the stories about how it happened, that all the psychics realized that there was something going on, all the mystical shamans, and they realized that if they all committed suicide at exactly the same time, they would all reincarnate together as a single being, and then that's what they did. But there's some question about whether Games Workshop is going to go with that or not. There was this other thing about the Star Child, this idea that the Emperor was in the process of turning into a chaos god, and eventually he would be a being called the Star Child, and it sort of like went away. And Games Workshop sort of like, anytime anybody brought it up, they went la la la, not listening, for about 15 years or so, and now it's beginning to pop up again.
It's like the squats.
Yeah.
Don't mention the squats around Games Workshop throughout the early aughts.
Yeah.
And or early aughts up until 2020. Don't mention them. It's like they were like, no, we don't want to hear about it. And I always thought that was such a missed opportunity. I was like, really? You could have just said they were all eaten by Tyranids or whatever, right?
Well, Service Johnson did say that.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he said that they were all.
That's where I got that from. Yeah.
But and then they came out with the Leagues of Votan. I like the idea that the Leagues of Votan have. We won't call them AIs, but they're AIs.
Yeah.
And as a result, that if the Imperium ever discovers exactly what the Votan are, the Leagues of Votan, like basically every great house has its own AI, that if the Imperium ever discovers that, they're going to instantly go in the warpath. I kind of like, what I wish they had done is I always thought the squats should have been the Mechanicus.
Okay,
yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah,
and so because the squats were always very mechanical, right?
Right.
Mining implies machinery and stuff like that. So if they had taken those and had the squats be the Mechanicus, I thought that would have been pretty good.
Meanwhile, the Tau have great AI.
Yeah, and so that's gonna ruffle some feathers. There's
Chaos is Evil
Warpath that was put together by some Games Workshop people, and they've got their own version of squats in it. Except there's dark squats. They're called the Forge Fathers, and there's basically the Forge Fathers don't tell the humans that there's actually two groups of Forge Fathers, and the forges are all based around like black holes and stuff like that.
Oh, interesting.
So sort of think the dwarfs from the MCU, except I think this predates it. But there's a group of basically dark dwarves, and we can't tell them apart. They can tell themselves apart, but we can't tell them apart. So they just sort of walk. Everybody goes, "Oh, there's one of the Forge Fathers." It's like, no, he's actually one of the other group. He's one of the group from the center of the galaxy, and they are not friendly. And they think they're like one of the older races, and they think that they're the most technologically developed. And the group that's sort of the Eldar equivalent is perfectly happy with the Forge Fathers thinking that they're the most technologically developed.
Interesting. Good. Well, I need to get going. I got dogs to walk.
Too. I've got a bunch of stuff I have to do tomorrow because I'm going to a game convention, leaving on Thursday, so no show next week. And Lissa's giving us the thumbs up at that. And so, and then the next show that I do solo will be my summary of sort of where we are in naval stuff, and then I will launch in that, doing more on that stuff. In fact, when we finish here, I'm going to go back and grab my iPad and go back to the book on battle cruisers that I'm reading, because one of the things I'm going to do, my intent is to sort of, along with adding to the long list of things I want to do, is I want to go through and talk about ship types. And so we've done naming and typing a long, long time ago, but I want to do one where like I do an episode on what is a destroyer, and then I do an episode on what is a cruiser. Actually, cruisers are going to need 2 episodes. And then what is a battleship and what is a battle cruiser and stuff like that, pulling from a bunch of different sources and sort of covering the history of it, and then sort of like going through into science fiction and what the implications of it for science fiction are. Because I think there's all sorts of great ideas that we don't see that would make sense. Part of why I do this show is I'm hoping that some brilliant author is going to stumble across it and start writing all the books that I would like to see written. Like I'd love to see a book written where, the battle cruiser squadron CO is being begged by somebody like, well, you've got a powerful warship. Why can't you protect us? And the answer is, I'm only good when I'm moving, right? I'm not good for sitting and defending something. I need to be moving. And so I can't just do interdiction of your planet, and you don't have enough support on the planet to stop the incoming fire. So I'm basically doing this by myself, and I have to keep moving, which means you're going to be vulnerable, which means if I try to fight them, they're going to kill you, and I can't stop them from killing you. And so I'm going to leave and go get help. And it sounds, yeah, and it totally makes sense. It's like you don't, if you don't have the right forces, you can't do it, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, everyone, live long and prosper, my friends. Thanks for having me on, Chris. Thanks, Lisa, for producing.
You're always welcome. And I'm glad to hear that Axanar is coming along. That's fantastic.
Yeah, things are going great. I'm really totally excited. So can't wait to get this LA shoot done. It's going to be amazing.
All right. Sounds good. Talk to you later then.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.